All right. We've got bread pudding for dessert, French Quarter bread pudding to be exact. Dessert, they say, sometimes is the best part of the meal. Sometimes they want to eat it first, but it is most important. Commander's Palace bread pudding is one of my favorites, as of course everyone that's ever been in New Orleans is very familiar with Commander's Palace. So that's kind of what I based my recipe on. What I just call this is a standard French Quarter bread pudding. Some use golden raisins or some kind of dried fruit. I've got some craisins here. We have also a little bit of nutmeg, some cinnamon and sugar. So you're basically making French toast, essentially, but you're baking it into sort of like a casserole. So I took some brioche lobster rolls and dried those out overnight. And then also with the cinnamon and sugar, like I said, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of nutmeg, a little bit of sugar, and we're and some egg, and we're basically going to use all of that and mix that together, let that soak for a minute, layer the craisins into the bottom. But first and foremost, you got to have fresh whipped cream. You don't want to use that canned nonsense. You got to go fresh. So hopefully you have your KitchenAid at home. If not, and you have a strong right hand, you can always take the whisk, put it in a bowl, and just beat the heck out of it. But I'm not going to do that because that's not what professionals do. They use the equipment and let them do all the heavy lifting. So this is just heavy whipping cream. So we've got heavy whipping cream going right into the mixing bowl, and just a little bit of sugar and a little bit of vanilla extract. We're going to taste it at the end, and I just kind of adjust the seasoning as needed. Vanilla extract is going to go in there in just a minute as well. So we're going to prop that up. You want to go slow. You want to start off slow with the KitchenAid. You turn this thing on fast, you're going to have cream all over the place. So start slow and then get it going almost as fast as you'd like. So we're going to let that whip here for just a minute, and then we're going to add our vanilla extract in at the end. If you're familiar with soft peaks, all those terminology, you really just want it to look like whipped cream. Don't worry about all the fancy chef terminology. We're going to add a little bit of vanilla extract. Turn down a little bit. Not too much. A little bit goes a long way. A little dab will do you. You don't want to go crazy with the vanilla extract. And I'm going to taste it, and I do think it needs a little bit more sugar, if I were to guess. And it does. Nothing serious. You can always add more. You can't take away. So we're going to do that real quick. Get it nice and fluffy. And that is your super simple, super fast. Oh yeah. Booyah. Fresh whipped cream. So that's done. Now we're going to soak the bread, the brioche bread. So basically you're just going to break it up into chunks. I like using brioche bread. It's buttery. It soaks flavor up better than other types of bread. I also like using croissants, but you definitely want to let it sit out overnight and get nice and dry, because it becomes the sponge that soaks up all the egg and all the goodness. Again, kind of like you're making French toast. Then we're going to add some buttermilk. And again, this is a lot of eyeballing. You're just putting a lot of liquid in here, getting it to soak up all those delicious flavors. A little bit of nutmeg. Not everyone does that one. I think that adds a little depth of flavor, so I think that's an important part. Cinnamon and sugar. Again, you got the French toast vibe. And a little bit more heavy cream. I got a little bit in the bottom there. And we're going to mix all that together with a rubber spatula. And you're going to bake it, so it doesn't need to sit very long. Once it's mixed, it's pretty much ready to go into the baking dish that you're going to use. So we're just making it all creamy and delicious. You want to have a little bit of liquid at the bottom. You don't want the bread to soak quite all of it up, because it's going to bake into basically almost like a custard. And now I've got 6 eggs. I've cracked those in last because I like to let the bread soak up all the seasonings, the cinnamon and sugar, the nutmeg, and a little bit of the buttermilk, and then add the egg at the end. That kind of helps to set better, in my personal opinion. So we're just going to crack 6 eggs into here at the very end. I'm doing it one-handed like a slickster, but that's probably why I got the shell in there. One hand, two hand, as long as the eggs get in and the shells get out, you're all set. So there we go with 6 eggs. And then I kind of beat them off to the side a little bit, just to kind of get them going, to crack the yolks, and then fold them into the rest of the delicious brioche. It's already soaking in the liquid super nice. It's getting nice and moist. You're just going to want to incorporate just till they're incorporated. Nothing serious. You don't want to beat the bread up too much. You still want it to be kind of chunky. You don't want to smush the bread and make it mushy. You don't want mushy bread pudding. So we have our standard Pyrex baking dish, which most people have in their homes. Any baking dish will do. Don't get too worried about where it came from or what size it is exactly. You're just going to stuff it in. So you're going to spread the craisins out evenly, and then take your bread pudding, mix, and just sort of slowly dump it over the craisins. The craisins are basically the bottom layer, and they'll just bake right into the whole thing. Get all that out of there, and then just spread it out evenly over the craisins so that they still stay on the bottom. Cover them up, just like so. Got your nice chunky peaks of delicious brioche popping out the top. And now you are ready to go in the oven, just like that. And while that's going in the oven, I'm going to make a little bit of bourbon cream sauce that's going to go on top when it comes out, and then the fresh whipped cream will go on there. So we're going to take some of the whipped cream. I made a little bit too much on purpose, so we can actually just take it right out. We're going to put some in the fridge to plate up later, but in the meantime, look at that, it's already in the whip. How convenient is that? Boom. And grab my whisk, kind of break it up just a little bit. Now we're going to add a little bourbon. Not to be confused with whiskey. Bourbon comes from Kentucky, although it doesn't anymore. Bourbon, as long as it's 51% sour or corn, you can call it bourbon. If it comes from California or Oregon or Colorado. But when I was growing up, bourbon only came from Kentucky and whiskey only came from Tennessee. But that was the 80s, I suppose. So that bourbon is basically gonna help mix this whipped cream down a little bit, so it's a little bit saucier. Still thick though, so you just kind of want to keep going until it gets a little bit thinner. I'm gonna add a little bit of powdered sugar. And that sort of re-thickens it and brings it back. You're kind of taking it apart and putting it back together, if you will. A little bit more bourbon. So now it's basically almost a sauce consistency. You want it just enough so you can. I usually put it in a squirt bottle and just sort of drizzle it all over the top, and then we're going to put a dollop of fresh cream, whipped cream on it at the end, a little strawberry and mint action. But that's looking nice and saucy. Oh yeah, like I said, we're going to put that in a squirt bottle a little bit. Once the bread pudding is done, drizzle it on top, and then it'll be beautiful. We're at home, so we can stick our fingers and stuff and lick it, and it's no big deal. Which I'm excited about, because I work in a kitchen where obviously when you're cooking for 10, 20, 30, or 200, you can't really be doing that. But at home it's perfectly fine. Anyway, so that's beautiful, just like that. You've got the bourbon flavor. Obviously I didn't cook it down at all. I mean, it's a bourbon sauce. 21-18 in Louisiana. So that will be good to go as soon as the bread pudding comes out of the oven. You got your whipped cream and your strawberries, and we'll be garnishing that as soon as it's ready. Hey now, Chef Greg Voley here with the Yeah You Right Cajun and Creole cooking show, where we take Cajun and Creole, we're going to marry that together. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, the difference between Creole and Cajun and how they make lovely, lovely music together. And talk about the city of New Orleans and what goes on down there and how to cook in that style. So we're going to start off with oysters, of course. Why wouldn't you start off with oysters when you're talking about New Orleans? Almost every chef I know loves oysters, second to none. Oyster po' boys. Every time you go to New Orleans, if you don't have an oyster po' boy, then you didn't really go to New Orleans, in my opinion. Unless you're allergic to shellfish, then you got to stay away. But regardless, we're going to start off with a real simple oyster dish using some fresh shucked oysters. We're going to make a remoulade that's a little bit more complicated than your average remoulade, but it's so delicious and so worth it. And we're going to start off with that. And the ingredients are all right here in front of me. So I'm going to start off with these soft-boiled eggs. Cooked about 7 minutes, so they're a teeny bit jammy in the middle, but they still have all their flavor and integrity. I'm actually going to take this strainer right here. I think this is an easier way to do it. We're just going to kind of push it right through the strainer. This is easier and makes less of a mess on your cutting board for when you're doing your other ingredients. Sort of almost jammy yolk, but not quite. But we're gonna mix with mayonnaise and all the other ingredients, so you're all good. If you undercook it a little, overcook it a little, don't sweat it. No big whoop. So there we go, we got the eggs in first. That's the easiest way to start. Again, we're making a Creole remoulade. Put that right there. Then we're gonna add some heirloom tomato that's been minced up. A little bit of garlic. Of course, garlic goes in almost everything, especially when you're talking about Creole cooking. These are capers. I suggest pickled okra if you have it. If not, capers are a great solution to that too. If you just have to use basic pickles, that's fine too, just a little bit of minced pickles. I'm actually gonna take the Cuisinart and pulse up some of these chipotles. So we pureed these chipotles. Now, they were dried chipotles. You can use canned if you'd like. I just use a couple of them, but the canned will probably be easier to find than the dried. I like the dried better. They have a little bit different flavor than the canned, a little brighter flavor. They're not necessarily spicier, but they just have a little more smokiness. So then when you, if they're dried, cook them in a little bit of water and then puree them and make almost like a paste. And then that's gonna go in there as well. Give it a little zing to your remoulade. And what else do we have here? We have some ancho powder. And a little bit of smoked paprika, not to be confused with regular paprika. Use regular if you got it, but the smoked, I think, definitely adds a little bit more flavor. Smoked is always better. Ketchup. Just some straight up standard ketchup, just a little bit. That just kind of helps round out all the flavors. Duke's mayonnaise, if you have it, you can get that almost anywhere in the country. This is actually Hellmann's mayonnaise, which is not bad, but if you're gonna be cooking Southern, Duke's mayonnaise is the way to go. Ask any chef from the Southeast. So we're just gonna write Duke's on here, and we're gonna pretend like it's just as delicious as Duke's, although Hellmann's is a good substitute. I grew up on Hellmann's, that's what my mom gave us. So we'll let it slide. Obviously, mayonnaise is the biggest part of remoulade. It's a mayonnaise-based sauce, and basically almost any remoulade can be so many different things. You can put so many different things in there. You always want something that's pickled. You want a little bit of vinegar. You want it bright. You want it flavorful. And then, I mean, you can literally put it on so many different things. Po' boys sandwiches, obviously with these oysters. I put it on certain types of fish. Sky's the limit. A little bit of grain mustard as well. Beep. A couple good spoonfuls of that. We're gonna zest a little bit of orange. And as I zest oranges, I kind of go just a little bit, tuck and go. I go right over the top. I mean, you can do it on your cutting board first if you'd like. I think going right in there is a way to go. It's easier. And then now a lot of it gets caught in there. A lot of people leave a lot of that on there. So I tap it down after I make one full circle. And remember, after you use this, you can still use all the juice out of any of your fruit. So don't zest it and get rid of it. There's still more to go. So that's about, I just kind of go once around each way. Citrus always adds brightness to just about anything. Citrus and vinegar are my two secret weapons. I will absolutely attest to that. If you taste something and it just needs something to just brighten it up or just bring it home, it almost always is because it needs some kind of acid. And because we're doing this with seafood, I'm going to go with a teeny bit more lemon zest than I did with the orange zest. What else? We got a little bit of shallot. When it comes to shallot versus onion, I just mince it. You know, some people kind of get really overly technical, like when you're cutting an onion, but I really just, I learned a long time ago from one of my chefs in Chicago, just mince it right up. It doesn't have to be a perfect little baby cube. So once you get it down, you can just kind of do it like as if you would with garlic. You just want to get it into it little bitty chunks. So there you go. That was just one little bit of shallot. And then a little bit of tarragon. So the tarragon here, some stems I use, I don't mind using parsley stems or cilantro stems. Tarragon stems are bitter, so you definitely want to pull the leaves off of a tarragon stem. Some stems have their merit and value, but tarragon ain't one of them. So I'm gonna do that, but I'm also gonna do the parsley as well, because when parsley is a little bit hardier, the stems are a little bit sturdier, and the tarragon is the leaves are so light and so gentle. If you mix it with the parsley, it's easier to cut it all together versus chopping it separately. Most times I've ever cut myself is when I'm cutting lettuce or greens, because your knife obviously goes right through it because there's nothing to it, so that's when you want to move your hands to the top of the knife. We're gonna see what we got here. Flavors, colors, all getting mixed together. And basically that's what remoulade is gonna look like. It's gonna look almost like Thousand Island dressing, but a million times tastier. The first time I'd had remoulade in the past, and the first time I went to New Orleans and had like a real remoulade with all the different crazy ingredients in it, it made a big difference. I was like, oh, this is remoulade? I thought remoulade had like mayonnaise and ketchup. Fancy sauce, some people might call that, but the real deal remoulade has almost too many ingredients, but you can't really have too many if they all go together well and all taste delicious. We're gonna see what that tastes like. And boom, I think we're exactly there. So we're gonna put that off to the side. And next we've got some beautiful oysters. Like I said, we've got some flour, and I've got some oil heating to 350. It looks like it's getting a little hot. So what you wanna do at home is take a candy thermometer, and you don't need that much oil. We're gonna fry like a dozen oysters, but if you fried a dozen, put them on a paper towel, fried another dozen. You don't want to make some giant monstrosity mess out of frying at home. If you have a fryer at home, that's great, but it's absolutely not necessary. They're already, oh yeah, look at that, they've already been taken off. I'm actually gonna season this flour. A little bit of this is fat lightening seasoning, so it's got sort of a blackening spice, it's an all-purpose spice, a barbecue spice. It's got a little bit of everything in it. It's got about 26, 27 different ingredients in it. We're just gonna mix it till it looks like it's a little bit orange. The flour itself, it looks like it needs a little bit more. And this may sound gross, but I don't mind sometimes tasting the flour, making sure it's got everything you need in it. We're actually going to add a little bit of salt to the flour as well, and a little fresh cracked black pepper. And yes, there's an oyster floating around in that flour, so we're going to save him here in just a minute. Very, very simple. Now normally you go wet dry method with some sort of battering and frying, but oysters have so much of that liqueur when they're in the shell themselves, and they're already a pretty wet product. So I just go straight from the liqueur, the oyster liqueur that it comes in, right into the flour. And again, now you got the salt content right. So I'm going to plop these oysters in here. Again, fresh shucked oysters are obviously beautiful and delicious and the way to go, but I mean, you can buy jars of fresh oysters. You could honestly even use, if you didn't have any other options, there's canned oysters. There's a lot of decent ones out there. We're gonna put them all in the flour, all at once. Pull them right off their little foot there, stuck to the shell. And our oil is nice and hot, ready to go. So when you drop something in any hot oil, I will immediately tell you, you want to do it away to you. So pull this candy thermometer out just so it doesn't get in the way of the process. So no matter what I'm frying, obviously take it out. You want to dip it in the oil, hold it down into the oil, and just kind of go away to me oyster. Let it get going. As soon as it gets going for about 2 or 3 seconds, push it away from you. That way you don't get burned. You send them packing, and that way they float away from you, and then they don't stick together either. You want them to all be separate. Now, when you put stuff in the oil, it's going to get less hot. So you kind of want to start out with a little hotter than you need it to be, because once you put product in there, it cools the oil down immediately. So now these oysters are completely done, and because you can eat oysters raw, you don't want to cook them very long. Just like most seafood, you don't want to fry them very long at all. So now you got your oysters. So So this is one of those fancy little chef tricks where you just take a big kitchen spoon, maybe a soup spoon, something you got in your drawer that's roughly this size. I'm gonna plate these on a nice rectangular plate. You're gonna take your remoulade, put 2 good sized dollops down, and then kind of scrape that off the back of the spoon because you're basically gonna do the push, which is whoop. That's what all the fancy people do in the restaurant. So now you've got that, and I'm just gonna set the oysters down into the remoulade, making sure everybody gets a little. Do that right there, and then I'll take some leftover flat leaf parsley and just pick some leaves, make it look nice. If you have any local microgreens, I'm lucky enough where I lived, there's a hydroponic microgreen farm right by me, and myself and that farmer have a great relationship. Circle A Farms in Cumming, Georgia, and she grows amazing microgreens, arugula, romaine, and I'm gonna take a little bit of my leftover smoked paprika, and that always looks nice on the plate too. Just kind of go all the way around, and just like that, delicious fried oyster appetizer. So for entree, we're gonna do catfish, which gets a bad name, I think, in a lot of parts of the country, and it's probably one of the better fishes. It's always like, oh, it's muddy bottom feeder catfish, and of course that's the way it was a million years ago. However, now it's mainly farmed. It's clean, it's delicious, it's versatile. I like to make catfish pate. Smoked catfish is great. Whenever we do fish fries at the club, we always use catfish. I don't tell people it's catfish because then they turn up their nose and say, oh, I don't like catfish. And I'm like, no, you do like catfish, you just don't know it yet. So I just tell them it's whitefish, and after they eat it and they're like, wow, what was that? That was so good. And I'm like, catfish. So I got you. So that's why I want to do that one today. It's also, you can find that in most places. It will be in frozen a lot of times, but IQF fish, there's nothing wrong with it. Usually they freeze it right away. It's not as, if it's not 100% fresh and it comes in frozen, it's not the end of the world. Don't be afraid to use it. So what we're gonna do with that, this is a blackened catfish dish with mock choux and andouille sausage. Mock choux, andouille sausage, along with boudin sausage are probably the 2 most popular sausages in New Orleans. Andouille being the smoked sausage that we're gonna use today. Mock choux is an American Indian, Native American dish that was kind of started getting used when French colonials came to New Orleans and started learning about how to grow corn and work with beans and that sorts of things, and then that kind of got ripened into the old Creole part of it. So basically it's bell peppers, a little bit of green onion and garlic, of course, and fresh sweet corn. So we're going to start off with these beautiful bell peppers right here. I like to use this wavy knife. This is one of my favorite versatile knives right here, actually. It's a bread knife, but it's wavy versus having teeth. So I mean, it slices tuna beautifully, it slices any kind of fish, prime rib, a lot of vegetables, and then that way you get all the way through there. Tomatoes, it's killer for tomatoes. So I kind of like to use this as an all-purpose knife a lot of the times. So for bell peppers, basically I just go all the way around to get the seeds out till it looks like a barrel. And then you want to always push your knife all the way down when you go through a bell pepper, otherwise the skin will not get cut through all the way, and then when you go to cut it the other way, everything's stuck together like an accordion, and you don't want any of that. So in the interest of showing you how to do it correctly, so instead of going like this with bell peppers, I drag my knife across like this, and that way you know the skin is split and it's not all stuck together. So then you got some beautiful dice there. Same thing, different color. Right down the center, get rid of the seeds. And the seeds won't kill you, but the red and green gives a nice nice color. So then you've got your red, your green, and then your yellow part of the corn. So then I cut that so it's a little bit more manageable. Make sure it's nice and flat, and then again you're dragging all the way across to get through the skin. And then you're good with your red and your green bell pepper. If you find any little scragglers that are big, no big whoop, get after them. Pile that up together with the celery. That's all going to get sauteed together. with a little bit of onion. And like I said, garlic, and those are going to go in the same pan we cook the fish in. I'm a big fan, especially in professional kitchens, of the less pans you use, the more efficient you can be. So when you're busy, you're not taking up 3 burners if you only have 6 burners. So I like to sear fish, take it out, finish it in the oven, and then cook the vegetables or whatever you're doing in the same pan, because not only is that more efficient, but it helps take on the flavor that the fish put in the pan. You've got all those, if you're searing, or in this case blackening, you've got all that stuff that's stuck to the pan, and then when you put all this stuff in there, it kind of comes up off the pan, and that just adds to the flavor of your dish. The frond, as they call it, if you will. So you got your red onion. Everybody's got their own little onion way. That's mine. Pushing that. This is all going to get sauteed together, so if it's in one big pile, don't even worry about it. Now for garlic, obviously I've already taken the skin off of it, but I just smash it with the butt of your knife like that. And again, just like I was talking about with the shallots earlier, you just want to kind of chop it. Don't worry about making adorable little squares. You're just mincing it right up. Mince, mince, mince. Chop, chop, chop. Pushing it off your knife. Keeping it going. And I always like to take the kernels off the corn anyway, especially if you have problems with the teeth. So this is obviously semi-shucked. You just want to make sure to take all that stuff off of there. Get the fuzzy hairs off. And then what I do when I cut corn, as opposed to going all the way down because it's so tall, I cut it in half first through the cob, and then if you cut it in half, you got 2 very flat, very simple surfaces to work with. And then you just, like so, shave the kernels off. And fresh corn obviously is so much better than any other kind. And it's available most of the year, but it's obviously in the fall, it's pretty abundant. So that goes over there with all your other ingredients. And now we're gonna move over to the catfish. Right here, once again, we're going to use some of this fat lightening spice right here. Again, this is good for boils, blackening, sort of all-purpose. And it's not got a low sodium content, so it actually, you can use it pretty liberally and not worry about anything being too salty. In fact, I'm going to actually add probably a little bit of salt to this. But obviously, you see when you blacken, you pretty much coat whatever you're cooking. So we're getting it all over both sides. And then whatever comes on. I'm doing this in a sheet tray so you can kind of catch the remnants and really get it dredged in there. See, like the the fish flapped over right there. Make sure you're coated. Salt, and I always say fresh cracked black pepper. There's nothing quite the same. You buy the crushed pepper at home or at the store, and from the shaker, it's just not quite the same. You get a more robust flavor if you crack the pepper every time. So that's kind of a big deal. And we're beeping, that must mean we're super excited to cook. So we're gonna turn it up, because when you wanna cook fish, everybody's always scared to cook fish at home. Some people just refuse to absolutely do it. It's all about the heat. You gotta cook on high heat if you want fish to sear properly without sticking and turning into just a big pile of mush and crust in the pan. You want your pan to be smoking hot, and when I say smoking hot, I mean you want to see smoke coming from the pan. When I blacken, I always like to use cast iron whenever possible. I see smoke coming up from the pan. Do not put the oil in your pan until it's smoking. And then when you're blackening and you have cast iron, you almost don't need to put hardly any oil in. I just put a little bit in there. Just enough. And then sometimes I'll take a kitchen towel, and coat the pan. And good cast iron is non-stick anyway, but I like to add that little bit of protection. And then you're just gonna take your fish. And this one's a little bit too big. I'm going to cut it down to size so it all fits in the pan nicely. We're going to serve it family style, so no big deal. And then I'm going to take my excess seasoning off here. Now there was raw fish in here, so you're probably saying, Chef, you're going to put raw fish on a pan. This fish is going to get seared hard and then go in the oven. That's going to kill any bacteria that was there from the raw fish in the first place. So don't freak out. And we've got some nice sound there, which means we're blackening nicely. We're going to let that sit till it gets dark. Now blackening, you want it to get dark, almost black, but not completely black. And because this is a really nice cast iron, it's not sticking, which is lovely. So it looks like it's got about a minute left. And then basically we're going to put this in the oven and bake it, and while it's baking we're going to finish the mock choux and put that in the same pan. And then by the time that's done, the fish is done, and then you're serving dinner. All right, so we've got our blackened catfish that's just come out of the oven. We cooked our mock choux with our beautiful and delicious sweet corn. Our andouille sausage, we actually deglazed with some local beer. I love cooking with beer whenever possible. White wine is usually the preferred method of deglazing, but I like to use beer whenever I can. I think it adds another depth of flavor, and there's so many good beers out there. The only thing you have to be careful with when you're cooking with beer and deglazing specifically is it will get bitter on you, so you don't want to cook it down too far, or you're going to get a bitter flavor that you weren't expecting. So just add a little salt and pepper here at the end. One more time. I'm gonna taste it, because you taste everything obviously multiple times. Make sure you got it right. Woo. Hot and delicious. You don't want to cook it too long. You want the corn to still be a little crunchy, the vegetables to still be a little crunchy. We're going to top the blackened catfish. We've got some lump crab. We've got some pickled red onions that we're going to throw in here. We're going to make a little pickled onion and crab salad. I actually have a little bit of the vinegar that they were pickled in. We got a little bit of pickled jalapeno for that zing zang. Just a little bit. Gonna mix that together. A little bit of salt and pepper, like so. Very simple. If you buy good crab, you don't need a whole lot. You want the crab flavor to shine through. So you've got your little crab salad going on here. Teeny bit of lemon juice. So I cut like a third of a lemon. I do this so I don't get any seeds and crack somebody's molar. Right there on top through a little strainer. Again with the lemon and the vibrance. A little bit of red wine vinegar and Worcestershire. Just a little. These are probably like 6 shakes of each. They go in there like so. And actually to bind it and hold it all together, I'm going to take some of that remoulade that we made for the oysters. Just a little bit to kind of like hold it all together. That's called cross-utilization in the professional world. You want to use products for multiple purposes for efficiency, and if it's a really good product you like, there's nothing wrong with using it in different ways for different dishes. So that's your lovely crab salad. Take the fanciest plate in the house, always if you can. I'm going to take my mock choux, put that down on the plate, and because it's got the red and the green and the yellow, it's gorgeous. Gorgeous pictures. I'm going to fill that up. We're serving this family style today, because why not? We've got our blackened catfish. We're just going to lay that right on top. And then we're going to take our crab salad, put a little bit of that on top of each piece of catfish. Little fish on fish action, nothing wrong with that. So you got all the food groups. You got shellfish, regular fish, and sausage. Those are 3 staples in most New Orleans dishes. A little bit of indulgence, nothing wrong with that. And I'm just going to take a little bit of green onion, slice it on the bias so that it'll look nice. Mix it, mix it, mix it. And then just a little of that on top of each one. And there is your blackened catfish with andouille, sausage mock choux, and jumbo lump crab salad. There we go. So our bread pudding should be puffed up nicely here in the oven. Looking pretty righteous. Like I said, not to downplay it and call it French toast casserole, but essentially that's what it is. So I'm going to find something to punch it out to make it look nice. Obviously we want to make it look beautiful. You could serve it like this, obviously, but because I'm a chef and I do it like that, we're going to punch a few of them out. And then you can always eat the corners later. You can make some kind of wild and crazy dessert. So I'm going to punch 3 because that's what's going to fit on my lovely yellow platter. Dried fruit is a big part of it. So there's one. Cut the middleman out there, and again, making sure I scrape the bottom to get the craisins too. And if you're on a date and there's like a third wheel, you put 3 on a platter, just like I'm doing right now. You and your significant other and that awkward friend. So those are those 3. And then the whipped cream that we made earlier is ready to go. Actually, I think I'm going to do the drizzle first. So this is the bourbon cream drizzle, bourbon cream sauce. And of course, when you put it in a squirt bottle, you can make it look extra cool. So we're going to go with the old crisscross method for a dollop of whipped cream on each one. Like I said, this is why fresh whipped cream is so much better than the canned stuff. One, two, tree. 1, 2, 3 of them. And then you just kind of haphazardly stick them in there, because when you whip your cream stiff enough, you can do cool funky stuff like this, and it'll stay in there without melting, although it will eventually melt, so you gotta eat it. But who's gonna wait when you got some beautiful dessert just like this? Tuck them in there, make them look nice. And then you got your French Quarter bread pudding with fresh whipped cream and bourbon buttermilk sauce. Enjoy. Well, thank you so much. This is the Yeah You Right New Orleans style cooking show. My name is Greg Boley. I'm executive chef at St. Ives Country Club, Johns Creek, Georgia. Thank you so much to Fat Lightning Almighty Seasoning for sponsoring the show and helping us cook some of this beautiful, delicious Creole and Cajun cuisine. And we hope to see you again real soon. Appreciate it.